Hello, it's James from Marketing for Restaurants here, and welcome to episode 48 of Secret Sauce, the restaurant marketing podcast. Lessons from Restaurant Lume, the best restaurant in Australia that you've probably never heard of.
Some restaurants are quiet, lose money, and the owner works 70 hours a week. Other restaurants are busy, profitable, and the owners work a few hours a day. What's the difference? They have a secret sauce. Join James from Marketing for Restaurants as he helps you come up with your recipe for restaurant success. Your secret sauce.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're a restaurant that does takeout and delivery, then hopefully you got something out of the two-parter episode that we put together, looking at the economics of online ordering and 7 ways that you can grow that. Lots of things. We did a lot of research around this because it is one of the things that a lot of our customers are really interested in. So lots of great tips in there. Today is going to be a really interesting discussion. We have on the show Veronica, who's the business manager from Restaurant Lume, which it's quite interesting because we often say you don't want to be the best restaurant that no one's ever heard of. Veronica and chef Sean Quaid run Restaurant Lume, which in Australia is the best restaurant that you've probably never heard of. It's a very successful restaurant. I've eaten there. The food there is truly amazing. Very comfortable to sit on amongst, some of the world's best restaurants. Chef Quaid is incredibly talented and innovative. The things that they do, though, are very innovative. Some of the things are really amazing. And yet, very few people in Australia have heard about them. And one of the things that I find really amazing is that I can go all the way around the world and be talking to people in Chicago about Restaurant Lume, and they go, oh, yeah, I've heard that place is really good. I'd love to go there one day. In Australia, people go, oh, where is that? Very interesting, their strategy. Very interesting, the way that they're using technology to build a truly amazing experience. Before we get into that really interesting interview, though, something quite interesting happened just recently. A restaurant that does souvlakis, or if you call them gyros, Kalimera Souvlaki Art. Now, I've been there before. I went there for a business lunch. So there was 3 of us. We wanted to meet somewhere sort of in the middle, and we wanted something that wasn't too expensive. And the souvlakis there are amazing. Very good food, great spot, great front of house team, and great work in the kitchen. Now, the interesting thing is that the New York Times is opening an Australian edition, and I think they probably flew a few people out. One of the people they did fly out to Australia was Sam Sifton, who was the food editor there. And he went to Kalimera Souvlaki Art, and it obviously was a fairly good experience for him because he actually wrote about it in the New York Times. And the story that he wrote was, how did he not know that there were pork gyros, because that's what he ended up having, a pork gyro, and he'd never had one before in his life. So he wrote it up in the New York Times, and he said, he ate the pork gyro, and then he flew back to the United States. It was a 14-hour flight. He spent all that time thinking about the pork gyro. He dreamt about the pork gyro, and on top of that, he's been cooking pork gyros when he got home. I think this is a great story about how a restaurant can get so much coverage, because these guys have got tens of thousands of dollars worth of free PR written up in the New York Times. There was an article about them in news.com.au, lots of press about that for them. And I was talking about it with the restaurant owner, and he said, yeah, they were, how lucky were they to be written up like that? And I thought, well, that's not really the case, because when you look at it, these sort of things, yes, it was a little bit lucky that he went in there, and he lucky that, they had pork gyros on the menu, lucky that he'd never had one, and lucky that he decided to write about it. But I think that this is really important to remember. Whilst you shouldn't build your business plan on luck, I think that would be absolutely crazy, it's important to recognise the effect of luck in your business, in your restaurant. And there's a couple of things. General George S. Patton Jr. said he would rather be lucky than good on any day. He also said that there's no such thing as luck, it's merely opportunity meeting preparedness. He saw luck as being such an important part of the battle that his call sign was actually Lucky 6. Ben Hogan, the famous golfer, his quote was that he found that golf was a game of luck. The funny thing was, the more he practiced, the luckier he got. And when you look at Souvlaki Art, there's a couple of things that they've done that have put them in that position to be lucky. One, they produce amazing souvlakis. The food's great, the environment's great front of house team, a great marketing effort. They've got 6,500 people following them on Facebook, and they're fairly regularly posting that sort of information up. They could be cooking great souvlakis, but if no one knew about them, then the New York Times editor probably would never get taken out there. I don't know what the circumstances were of him finding that place. But it really does sort of highlight that, if you put the hard yards in, every now and then you do get lucky, and it can pay off in a really, really big way. So, congratulations to Tom and the team out at Kalimera Souvlaki Art. Now, on to the best restaurant in Australia that you've probably never heard of. Really lucky to have the business manager from there, Veronica talking with us today. So let's see if we can find out some of the ingredients for the secret sauce that has made Restaurant Lume such a successful restaurant. Welcome to the show, Veronica.
Thank you, James. I'm absolutely delighted to be chatting to you. I've been listening to this show for, lurking in the background as a listener for quite some time. So
wow,
pleasure.
That's exciting. Now, you are the business manager at Lume, which I would have to say is the best restaurant in Australia that no one's ever heard of. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. We were named by Gourmet as Australia's best restaurant in 2016, but didn't get a lot of airplay for that. Most people still don't know who we are.
The food is amazing, definitely on a par that would sit quite well on some of the best restaurants throughout the world from what I've eaten there. If it has such a low profile in Australia, how can you be successful?
Well, the food all comes from the mind of my partner, actually, Sean Quaid, who's the executive chef. And Sean's never really been much of a PR darling. He's not the type that you see at after parties all the time. He keeps it pretty low profile. And we've very much tried to, retain that philosophy in everything that we do at the restaurant. We try not to be really loud and aggressive in the way that we do things. But we just find that, the Australian market doesn't take to that so much, probably, as opposed to what the publicity that we get overseas. So we find that an enormous proportion of our bookings actually come from overseas tourists and destination diners. So we find that we're really, really big in Asia. A lot of people coming in from China, from Singapore, a lot of people coming in from the States, the UK, but not so popular actually in our backyard.
That's really quite amazing. There must be a significant element of conservatism amongst Australian diners then, one would have thought.
I think so. I think a journalist summed it up pretty succinctly a little while ago, and I always come back to this quote, but she wrote that we're the David Lynch of restaurants in a bad way, which we read that and thought, awesome, but then realised it was meant to be a negative comment. We've been getting heaps of interest from overseas at the moment, particularly around LA, where people just go mental for that concept. And, to be fair, we're not conservative in any way, shape or form, but, maybe the market over here is not quite ready for what we do at this point. And fair enough, that's just the way it is in Australia.
I think it's really exciting that someone can build a successful restaurant, a really successful restaurant business, and not have to worry about the home market. That's, the fact that it's, almost an export destination, that's a really powerful, it's a testament to the product that Sean and you have created then, that it can be, basically an export restaurant.
Yeah, I think we'd always like to get more recognition from within our own industry. But if you think about the kind of restaurants that are popular in the market at the moment, there's a lot of a switch to the more casual offerings. So, we see restaurateurs like Neil Perry moving towards burgers, and, everyone's opening up a burger bar at the moment. And hey, maybe next year Lume might turn into a burger bar as well. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. But I guess there's an increasingly niche market for fine dining. probably all over the world as well, not just Australia. So it is getting harder and harder to, I guess, attract customers into that kind of venue.
One of the things that I find absolutely fascinating, so fine dining you particularly associate with, it's an expensive product, it's a premium product, and it's a product it tends to be for more, sort of discerning tastes. One of the things that Sean was saying that I found absolutely fascinating was the average age of your guests. What is the average kind of customer that you'd have at Lume?
Well, this actually shocked us, and we only found out through looking at our Facebook analytics once. But we expected that the kind of people coming to Lume might be a little bit older, maybe higher income. Obviously, it's not the cheapest menu you can get in town. But it was shockingly like the 24 to 35-year-old market that is worlds beyond any of the other age demographics. So just completely disproportionately skewed towards that younger audience, which really shocked us and I guess makes sense because we're not the kind of restaurant that plays elevator music. We play a lot of pretty younger, edgier rock.
It is amazing because it's one of those things that you just don't associate. And I think that goes towards the kind of product that you've packaged up. So you describe it as a multi-sensory dining experience. What does that mean? How does that play out for the average diner who goes to Lume?
So, I mean, there was a while where we were considering that maybe we're not even a restaurant, which is not true. We are. But I guess our philosophy is that food is about more than taste alone. So we think that it's about engaging all of the senses, not just what you taste in your mouth. It's about sight. How does the food look? That's why Instagram is so popular. We taste with our eyes as well. It's about the sound, like what kind of environment are we enjoying our food in that maybe changes or alters the perception of how we taste it? What are the colours around us that we're seeing as we're tasting it, and how does that affect the meal? Or how do all of these factors influence the overall experience? And so just, I guess, playing on that idea, we started thinking about, goodness, let's think outside of, the traditional hospitality concept of having chefs back of house and servers front of house. What if we put, threw some actors in there, threw some musicians in there, some artists and sculptures, and even had a hypnotist in there? Going further from that, like, what if we didn't even tell people we were doing that? We just made them feel it instead of tell them. Like, just experience it. You don't even need to know what we're doing behind the scenes. Just feel it. That's what we thought of as multisensory.
And what's the reaction from the guests when they experience? What would be some of the things that they would experience that would be a little bit different to your typical fine dining evening?
We use a bit of subliminal messaging in there. So we sometimes put messages overlaid onto the soundtracks that we're playing. A lot of them cheeky little references. A lot of diners know to listen out for them now, which I think adds that little additional element of enjoyment. It's almost like picking up on all of the Easter eggs that we've hidden through the restaurant. There's a lot of references in the imaging that we use in paintings and pictures that we put around the restaurant as well. Sometimes we plant actors within the dining audience, so you might actually be sitting at a table next to a planted actor who's in some way playing a role that's going to enhance the experience for you. People, when they book for our restaurant, given a questionnaire, traditionally you might get that when you book to go to a restaurant, and it'll ask you, do you have any dietary requirements, or are you celebrating a special occasion? We find those questions very boring. So instead we put Myers-Briggs test questions in there to try and get a sense of the people that were coming into our restaurant and kind of how willing they were to play, to have fun with us. So we ask things like, can you remember a time in your life when you were ever truly happy without a care in the world? That question might seem a bit silly to some people, and if they choose not to answer it, fair call. We know that they probably want a more conservative experience. Other people write 2 pages, and we can gather a lot of information from them just from that, and that information we can use to cater the experience just for them and, reference elements of their memories or things that we know they like, and just really add this layer that no other restaurant can to their experience. Wow,
that's a lot of prep work for looking at each of the guests that are coming in.
Yeah, so we do spend a lot of time thinking about that. But I guess that's what separates a casual restaurant from one that's really aiming to be of world-class calibre, I'd say. I mean, if you think about the world's number one at the moment, 11 Madison Park, they use a lot of CRM technology to pretty much stalk their guests. And some people think that's a bit scary, but for the most part, people are just delighted that they've had these highly customised experiences.
Where there's experience, there's margin, and when you get away from selling food, as much as, you know, chefs hate to hear this, it's an additional opportunity to create revenue, isn't it, really? I mean, that's what people tend to go out for, that experience.
The way we figure, it's never pleasant to bring it down to money, but I think it's a pretty common statistic that many venues close down within their first 12 months. We were pretty happy to last that long, at least. And I think if you're going to last that long, you've got to do more than just food. You have to think about some other way to make what you do unique and convince people that it's worth spending money on, you know.
Absolutely, particularly if you're going to all of that work in the background. Yeah, that's amazing.
Melbourne is a big market. There is a lot of really fantastic restaurants over here. And so I guess what we always say to each other, Sean and I, is that we don't want to be in a race that we can't win, meaning we don't just want to be another drop in the massive ocean of restaurants. We'd rather choose something, you know, take it into a direction that no one's seen yet and at least do something different. Whether it's liked or not by Australia, not so sure.
I think that it's amazing just how much international traffic you attract. It's definitely something that's resonating with international visitors, if not a potentially more conservative Melbourne audience.
Yeah, I find it really surprising, especially the growth of the Asian market. So many tourists are coming over to Australia right now from that part of the world. And it's not limited just to the food and wine industry either. It's in all aspects of tourism. I just think from a restaurant perspective, that's something that we identified and thought, oh, goodness, we better start capitalising on this and actually catering what we do to that growing market. So something that we did immediately was noticing that a lot of the customers coming from China, for instance, when we look at our restaurant analytics, they weren't ordering much wine. And just understanding a bit more about the cultural background, we started to understand that wine is just, you know, often the Chinese guests just not big wine drinkers. It's not so much of a cultural norm as it is for Australia. So we started creating non-alcoholic beverage pairings that would, I guess, suit what they wanted and still, you know, meant that we could create a beverage offering and not lose out entirely on making sales like that. So it's about just being flexible, remembering to not getting a bit too cocky in what we do and remembering that at the end of the day, we still are there to serve guests and what they want, not what we want.
That's pretty cool, though, because when you think about it, the drink pairing with a 10, 12, 16-course meal, that's a fairly important part of the journey. And to not have that as something, you know, really wouldn't be quite the full package, would it? So that's worked well with the visitors from Asia?
Yeah, it's gone really well. But, I mean, to me, it's actually something that's growing in popularity everywhere, in Australia as well. A lot of people are moving more towards non-alcoholic pairings, which means that, for one, it's another avenue for our kitchen team and our amazing bar manager, Orlando, to just play around with and add even more, you know, enhance the meal even further through this additional layer of flavour. But I always think if you can manage to convince alcohol drinkers to order the non-alcoholic pairing and enjoy it just as much, then you're winning.
Yep. That's a really interesting insight. So Lume is fairly edgy, quite happy trialling new things to see how they sort of fit into the dining experience. As a part of that, you've now got the reputation of one of the world's leading virtual reality restaurants. How did you get into that?
Not intentionally. We didn't set out to claim that title, but we didn't even realise at the time that we were the first restaurant in Australia, or the first fine dining venue at least, to experiment with VR. We started it last year as part of a pop-up that we did for Taste of Melbourne Festival, which is pretty much a big foodie festival in a big field in Albert Park. And when they first approached us to do this, I'm not going to lie, we pretty much told them to piss off. There's no way Lume does. We don't serve food in a field. We're not that kind of venue. But then we thought of it a bit more deeply, like, actually, this is a really interesting challenge. How can we recreate that fine dining experience in that outdoor setting? And the answer was through virtual reality in a shipping container with actors. So we managed to get some sponsorship from Taste and some sponsorship from Samsung and a company called Catalyst VR to create. It's an experience where diners come into this shipping container and it's completely kitted out as though we've had a chunk of Lume airlifted out and plopped in the field. So as soon as you enter this container, it's just like being in the dining room at Lume. And then people put the headset on and they're taken on about a 15-minute journey through the body of a chef. So they're guided by Sean as he is in the kitchen talking about the preparation of the dish that he's about to do, a Maya lemon tree dessert. And then you fly out to the Yarra Valley and you're suddenly immersed amongst the lemon trees in the orchard, smelling the lemon scent, feeling the breeze in your hair, feeling the grass in your toes. And then you're, zoomed back into the restaurant setting, presented with the meal, and that's when you take the headset off and it's there right in front of you to eat. So it was a really, really interesting challenge. How on earth do you enjoy food with this clunky VR headset on you? That's what we had to overcome. And we decided that, well, for a start, you don't do both at the same time. You don't eat and wear the headset at the same time. But there was a role for it to be incorporated as part of the storytelling aspect of where that dish came from, how it was created.
So you're really using the technology to better tell the story of the ingredients and the process that you use with those ingredients to create the dishes that are served up.
Absolutely. It really does all come down to storytelling, because otherwise what differentiates us from any other restaurant? Like, everyone has a story behind them, and I think that's what people want to hear. I know that that's what I want to hear. If I'm sitting down looking at a wine menu, trying to decide which bottle of wine I want to order in a restaurant, it's always the one that has a story behind it that I'll go with. And that, to be honest, I think that influences the way that you taste it as well. So it's really important to us that we create a narrative around everything we do. I guess that's why we've got 4 scriptwriters on the team at Lume.
Wow. What sort of technology do you use then? What sort of headsets are they?
We started out with the Samsung, and I forget what it was called. This is a very competitive market, I've since understood, so it's constantly changing. But we did start out with the Samsung gear, and now we've invested in some of the Google Daydream headsets with the Pixel phones. Look, it's constantly evolving. And I don't know if there's one that's other. It's just such a rapidly moving market that all we do is try and keep up with the next cool stuff that's coming out. And we don't just use that. Like, we do a lot of projection as well. So 360 projection mapping, augmented reality is a really big thing that's coming up as well. But to us, it's just about using every tool in the arsenal. What's out there and how can we incorporate what might not traditionally be associated with a restaurant into the dining experience.
How did you create the content for it? What was the process there?
We worked with Catalyst VR, who were the content producers. So they do all of the filming, and it was pretty much a collaboration between them and Sean. So him, I guess, talking through the journey of it. And then we were collaborating with a couple of our actors as well and our script writers to just work that into a more holistic journey, like working out how that flowed from the time a guest comes through the gates at Taste Festival to actually enter into that magical world, I suppose, and how it all fits together. So to answer your question very simply, it's pretty much just having playwrights, chefs, artists, actors, musicians, all on the team at once. It's not just one person that can do these things on their own.
How was that received? Like, what did the customers think of it?
People loved it. We got a lot of really funny footage while people were sitting there having the headsets on, because they kind of forget that you can see them even when they can't see you. So we've got some pretty funny videos. We had a GoPro rolling the whole time, and it's pretty funny. They don't realise that behind the scenes, as they're watching this film, so to speak, and they've got earplugs in, everything that they can see is blocked out, and it's just focused on the VR film. They don't realise that we're actually all running around like headless chooks behind the scenes, prepping for their dessert to come out, like spritzing them with lemon-scented perfume, blowing fans in their faces and stuff. So it was pretty funny. And we got a lot of Polaroid shots to give them on the way out of what was happening when they didn't realise.
Oh, the thing I find really interesting is the fact that I've seen a lot of VR implementations in a range of industries, but you're one of the few that's actually going with a multisensory approach which augments the virtual reality component of it. That's really cool.
When we were first thinking about this, we went out to a few VR amusement centres in Melbourne just to try and, we didn't know anything about virtual reality at all. So Sean and I were just trying to get a sense of it and play around with some of the games that existed. And we were really shocked at, I guess, how clunky some of it was, which only interested us further, because how do we actually, it's still really cool technology. How do we maximise it? There's a lot of potential there, but we felt like it wasn't kind of, being used to its full potential yet. It needed another element. And so, that's where the food came in.
So all of that investment in, all of the ancillary skills that you've got, as well as all of the effort that goes in the kitchen, obviously there's significant costs with that. And one of the big issues with fine dining is no-shows. You're doing something a little bit innovative to combat no-shows. How many no-shows would you get a week now?
0. It's pretty rare that we have anyone that doesn't turn up. So
I find that fascinating, because that's a big comment, because I know a lot of people in the industry talk about no-shows being a massive problem. You've just said 0, not a problem at all. How have you done that?
Yeah. So we've spoken a lot about this in the media before, and I think it's a bit of a new concept for Australia. It's really, really common practice overseas, but we, being a fine dining venue and being, pretty theatrical in the experience that we offer, we thought that it made complete sense to make our bookings process more like a ticket for an event. So just like you would purchase a ticket to go to a gig or to get on a plane, we thought, well, we really solved that issue of having people make a booking at our restaurant and then just not turn up and not tell us that they've cancelled or anything, by just getting them to pay up front. Now, this made complete sense to me because my background is not in hospitality. I'm an economist, and I just thought, well, this makes total logical sense. If it works in every other industry, why wouldn't it work in hospitality as well? So we started looking into a product called TOC. It's a bookings platform out of the States that pretty much was created out of the same issue at a linear restaurant, which is very, very highly experiential fine dining restaurant in Chicago. And they were having a similar problem as well. This was years and years ago. And this was just, they created TOC as a solution for it. So it's a platform where you get on, it's almost like booking on Airbnb, choose the dining experience you want, pay your credit card details, and boom, all booked. Look, it's not for everyone, but it brought our no-show rate down from losing about $3,000 a week to losing 0. What shocked us the most was that, we were pretty hesitant about it, not really knowing how the Australian market would accept that, whether it would just be completely unpalatable and, that's not the way we do things over here, that's not on, or whether they'd embrace it. And we were shocked that no one complained, just everyone was fine with it. It made sense.
That's an amazing effect on the bottom line then, to be able to eliminate no-shows when they were so expensive. We would be shut by now if we didn't have that. Really? That's a big impact then. Like, that is literally the difference between life and death.
It really is. And if you think about how many restaurants go out of business every month and how many fantastic restaurants go out of business as well, And then people are, all up in arms that, oh my God, I can't believe that you guys closed. And it's like, well, because no one was coming. At the end of the day, we don't get to do all of this cool stuff and have a restaurant at all if we don't take preventative steps like that, just from being smart about the way that we run our business.
That's quite innovative, isn't it? What sort of feedback have you had then from the media around that?
We've had really, really positive feedback from customers and a bit of really negative feedback from the media, mainly from the real old school, like the old guard of food journalists. So I'm thinking about one in particular that just went to town on us in this unbelievably uninformed article about how in some way our prepayment system meant that we were no longer offering genuine human connection or hospitality. It's just extremely misguided to us because it means that we can spend time rather than being on the phone, taking bookings all day, actually like putting all of that effort into creating the experiences for our guests, learning more about who they are and catering more to what they want. It's just crazy.
It is interesting, and I wonder how many more restaurants are going to look at that, particularly the savings that they can make. And this is one of the questions that you need to ask yourself. How many restaurants have gone out of business needlessly because they weren't managing no-shows in a way that was going to help them in their business?
Absolutely. I think a lot of restaurateurs are just frightened about taking a step like that because it is a big leap. It's not something that's common in the industry in Australia right now. And even though it's being done overseas, I guess for restaurateurs, it's scary to be that first one that takes the jump. I'm going to be completely honest and say that it was Sean's idea to do it. I have to say, he's pretty visionary in that regard. And I was actually the one saying, no way, we can't do this. It's going to be an absolute media nightmare. Don't do it. And he did it anyway. And God bless him, I'm so glad he did.
That is amazing, to be able to make such a fundamental change to the profitability of a restaurant with the use of just one system. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means that we get to, I guess because we get that money up front now, we don't have to, we can negotiate better terms with our suppliers. We can afford to spend the money on the cool technology we want to bring into the restaurant. So, yeah.
Now, looking at some of the things that you do around corporate events, they are definitely cutting edge as far as creating an experience for the corporate customer. Are you happy to share some of the things that you've done? Like, how, give us an example of a corporate event that you've run and the kind of things, the kind of experience that a customer sort of gets when they have the Lume corporate experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that we offer separately from the restaurant now. We never intended to be doing so many private or corporate events. I guess it just started evolving out of this pretty unexpected demand for immersive events. But we started doing a lot of immersive scripted events that were, where we went completely all out with VR, with musicians, artists. We even had creators of dystopian animatronics that we were working with, and just running these as events just to entertain ourselves, running at a complete loss with them. We made no money on it. It was really just fun. But then we started to notice that people kept wanting to book them. The people that wanted to book them were going from, just small private parties to actual, big corporate businesses that were interested in using them for, for entertaining their own clients, for product launches, for marketing activations and stuff. So we just started doing more and more of them. I think one example was a few months ago we did one for the New Zealand Convention Centre that's about to open up in Auckland. And they had about 50 people from all around the world that came in to do an immersive dinner at Lume. And there was quite a long lead up to the dinner where we tried to get people engaged from day one by sending out videos from the restaurant to them, sending out videos showing the chefs foraging for the ingredients, for example, and really starting to draw a connection between the kitchen and dining on that night from months and months in advance. We were sending out invitations that were sprayed with a particular perfume that we created that was inspired by New Zealand native ingredients, pretty much as a way of anchoring people's connection to the event. We were sending out invitations with that scent spritzed onto it. We were using that scent in atomizers in the venue on the night. We were using it in the bathroom. We'd use it with fans from under the table to really help people connect with that aroma. And then that was then used post-event as well in a cookbook that we created, which was delivered out to all of the guests that had, photos from the evening, recipes from all of the dishes Sean created on that night. And again, spritz with that aroma again to really bring people's memories back to that moment. So that's the kind of stuff that we do. We completely cater it to be a different experience every time. It just depends on who the client is, what kind of event they want to have, and then we just go to town having fun.
So that cookbook, that was a bespoke cookbook written for the event?
Yeah, that was just for the guests on that night.
Wow. What sort of format was it in?
Just a big, beautiful hard copy photo book, like a hard copy coffee table book.
And the photos of the meals and from the event, was it?
Yeah, even we had people write down little notes to themselves, almost like a time capsule that we then reprinted in the back of the book as well. So it's all about ways that we could, I guess, re-invoke that memory. And for the client, it was about reminding them, obviously, of the convention centre and of the brand. So they seemed happy.
And I wonder why. Because I think that the amazing thing about that is we've all been to a lot of events and you go there, you have a few drinks, you eat some nice food, and it's all pretty good. But almost the next day, you're starting to forget about the event.
Totally. Even when I go out to eat at restaurants, on a tasting menu like you have at Lume, you get to the 15th course and it's pretty hard to remember after a few sips of wine as well what you've had that night. So I'd love having a way of documenting it. And as I said earlier, we eat with our eyes as well. I love looking at food. I think with Lume in particular, Sean creates visually stunning dishes. Like I want to relive that and remember the experience that I had and the people that I were with and the food that I ate.
But I think the amazing thing, because, you go to an event and there's food and drink. You go to a good event and there's the little goodie bag at the end of it that's got all of the bits and pieces in there. The thing that you're doing is anchoring that experience by sending out a book that is and let's face it, most of that stuff gets thrown in the bin anyway. You're sending out a cookbook from the event with photos of the participants at the event. So, no one's going to throw away a cookbook that reminds them of such a great event that they are actually featured in. And B, what a perfect way of creating, sort of brand recognition, because that's probably going to sit on someone's coffee table for the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping.
Yeah.
We'll just put a big Lume logo on everything. We're always trying to think of ways that we can get our logo out that aren't just tattooing it on people directly, which is also an option. We had when we first opened, there was some pretty hilarious articles that came out in the media that just, the photographers came out to take photos of the dishes, and when the articles were actually published, it was just with the tattoos that the chefs had, which we thought was hilarious, but probably not quite the direction that we intended for that to go in.
Quite funny. So, being a progressive restaurant, I'm assuming that you're not going to be standing still for too long. What's the roadmap for Lume look like?
We want to expand the creative aspect of it. So we're always looking for new collaborators to come and work with us on the team. We're pretty much, nothing is out of bounds or out of limits for Lume. We want to work with anyone who has an idea that can enhance the experience. And we've just started doing some work actually with some students at RMIT who are going to be working on creating an augmented reality experience as part of an event that we run called the Great Australian Road Trip. And that's a multisensory dining journey where in one night we take guests on the quintessential Aussie road trip all around Australia. And we've been running that event for about a year now and just keep adding more and more elements to it all the time and building it and building it. We're actually going to be renovating the restaurant as of next week. So for all of July, we'll be doing renovations and building a back room that's going to be exclusively for our multisensory events. So we're putting cyclorama screens all around the perimeter, which are just like, they're pretty much like green screens. They're just blank screens that we can project from. We're going to be installing projectors onto the ceiling. We're actually looking at expanding. We've had a lot of, as I said earlier, we've had a lot of interest from the overseas market. So we're looking at potentially setting up a second venue in LA at the moment, where I think from all the feedback we get, it sounds like, yeah, we fit in very well with what we do over there. And there'd certainly be no shortage of actors either that can work on our team.
It all sounds very exciting, and I think one of the things that's interesting is we haven't really talked a lot about the food, but Sean is an amazingly talented chef creating some...
Well,
yeah, sorry.
I figure you need to just get him on the podcast to talk about what he does, because I can't do it justice in my words.
And I think that would be awesome because, you know, I'm particularly interested in the creativity component of what it is that he does, because and I think there's a quote from John Lethlean that there's things going on in the kitchen at Lume that happening anywhere else in Australia. And he said, didn't he say, or potentially the world?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that really, when you've got a reviewer like John who's saying something like that, it really does highlight just the amazing talent for creativity and innovation based on some extremely solid skills to be able to create a really and then linking it up with the multisensory dining, the experiential approach that what you're doing and things like VR and amazing corporate events. And I think, you know, really that's how you can be an incredibly successful restaurant that no one in Australia has heard of, because you've got all of those things going for you. Amazing.
Absolutely agree. And I think, I mean, I know Sean must get annoyed with me because I'm always crapping on about the multisensory aspect of things, and, you know, probably he feels like it's overshadowing what's happening in the kitchen. But I do have to remind everyone that essentially none of this would be possible if he wasn't actually a genuinely spectacular chef. But at the end of the day, it really does just ride on the fact that his food is incredible, and all of the other stuff that we do around creating a multisensory environment and the consideration that we put into the back end of things and the, you know, theatrics of it is really just to support essentially what the kitchen team do so well, and what our front of house team do so well as well.
Absolutely.
I can't take credit for any of that, sadly.
These are the other components. I think, you know, it's all good to talk about these kind of things, but you need to have the innovation and creativity. You then need to have the skills to run a restaurant. You need to build a team and all of those sort of things. So it would be fascinating to talk to Sean about, you know, the journey that he's had to get to the point where he's been able to build a team that's able to, you know, every night deliver such amazing experiences for a wide and eclectic audience.
Yeah, I'm just dumbfounded all the time to think how much work has gone into getting it to the level that it is now. And I had the pleasure of actually being able to sit there as a diner often and just enjoy it as a customer. But yeah, it's not being from hospitality myself, I just can't believe, how much work must go into that and how they manage to pull it off every night.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing so much of the insights into what is an incredibly successful and exciting restaurant, and just freely sharing those secrets, because I think that it's a really fascinating insight into a business that's doing something a little bit different to what a lot of restaurants are doing, and that is probably no small part of the level of success, the fact that you're not doing the going down the path that everyone else is taking. So thank you very much, Veronica.
Thank you so much for having me on, James. Really, really an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Bye. So how interesting was that discussion? I find it amazing. So the big thing to think about is Chef Quaid, amazing talent, amazing creativity and innovation, in conjunction with a real desire to use some amazing technology in the restaurant, out of the restaurant, so using TOC as a booking system to be able to decrease their no-shows down to zero. That's an amazing accomplishment in itself. Using virtual reality and being able to be acclaimed as one of the best virtual reality restaurants in the world, that's an amazing feat. Now, the challenge for you is to work out what are the elements of their story, what are the ingredients in their secret sauce that you can take and use in your restaurant. And I think a lot of it comes down to creativity. A lot of it comes down to looking to embrace new technology. Time and time again, we see restaurants who continue to do the things that they've been doing for the last 10 or 20 years. And these are the restaurants who tend to be struggling more and more because the way that people are dining is changing. And technology is a fundamental part of that. Technology is driving the changes of consumers. And if you're not understanding what those changes are, then it makes it really difficult. If you're embracing those changes, and a lot of restaurants are trying a lot of things. If you're out there, then it gives you the real opportunity to become a market leader, to learn more about the consumers, to learn more what the opportunities are. And I think that that's the kind of thing that you want to be thinking about. What is it that they're doing in fine dining? What is it that can sort of come down? And what is it that you can bring from your life, from your experiences, from the tech that your kids are using? How is it that you can embrace that? And, one of the fundamental things that we see is that it's amazing watching the transformation in a restaurant as they just start to take up something like Facebook. Well, we never had Facebook when I was a kid and we're not going to be using it. And then, you see the next generation sort of come on board and then start to tell the story about what makes that restaurant unique. And all of a sudden it's getting put into a much bigger audience and they become a lot more successful. There's plenty of other technology out there as well that you can be using in your restaurant, either front of house, back of house, or just as a better way to tell that story. So that's it. I hope you got something out of it. I certainly did. It's an amazing story. If you get the opportunity, head into Restaurant Lume. It's a truly amazing meal that they produce. That's it. I hope you have a busy week. Bye.
Want more customers for your restaurant, cafe or takeout? Every month, our marketing tools and information are used by thousands of restaurant owners just like you to help them find more customers and turn them into repeat customers. All of our tools and information is designed specifically for restaurant owners. We know you don't have a lot of time to spend marketing or learning complicated procedures, so our tools are quick and easy to use. If you're looking to increase your revenue and profits or want to work less hours, check out marketingforrestaurants.com.